Us. Let's try again, see how we go. Let us know if we have sound. Today, we're going to look at performance-enhancing drugs, uh, especially because it's the Tour de France time.
You love the Tour de France.
I love the Tour de France. I used to stay up and watch it pretty well every night until I was drooling too much in the morning. So now I just watch the recap the next day. Amazing race. But it's also rife with performance-enhancing drugs. I even wrote about it in my book. The first recorded cases of performance-enhancing drugs in the Tour de France was in 1888, would you believe? And the Henry Desgrange wrote a reminder into the event's official rule book in 1930, actually, that the organizer wouldn't be supplying any drugs this year. You had to find your own. And it was right up until, I think, 2000 before they had a reliable testing protocol for EPO. Okay. Now, EPO is a really important drug for these guys. It's one of the drugs that Lance Armstrong was busted for, erythropoietin. What it does is it increases the hemoglobin content of the blood. Now, remember, the blood only has fundamentally four components. Hemoglobin, which is the oxygen carrying component. You had the white blood cells, which is the defensive component. You have plasma, which is the liquid component, and you have platelets, which is the blood clotting component. Now, if you increase one of those, it means by nature the other levels decrease. So when you increase EPO beyond a natural level, and remember, EPO is a naturally occurring drug. It's only, generally speaking, when you find ways to introduce it that problems arise. But when you increase the EPO, hemoglobin content, the blood becomes relatively viscous. It means the plasma or the liquid level drops relatively. So when you take EPO, your blood becomes thick. When your blood pressure drops after a hard day of riding, basically the blood flow stops.
Yeah, it's difficult for the blood to pump the blood through the body because it's so thick and so sticky, essentially, that the heart can stop. You can have a stroke, that kind of thing.
So I took a few notes, and they say that the prevalence of it has decreased. My thought is that they are better at finding ways to hide it than science is at finding ways to detect it. So you have microdosing and
gene doping.
Gene doping. So what microdosing? See, EPO artificially in anything that's introduced exogenously from outside of the body can cause problems. Okay, so an EPO has a very short lifespan. So they have ways, they use these biomarkers now. They have athlete passports,
doping passports, yeah.
Doping passports, so they monitor them 24 all year round to tell if there's an unusual spike in something, and that's how they can tell. Usually, in theory, that's how they can tell if they've been using drugs. But by using microdosing, what it does is it introduces very, very small amounts so that it doesn't get detected. Okay, then you look at gene doping. It's even more sinister. What they do is they actually alter the gene of the athlete so that the body, they introduce DNA that encourages the natural production of EPO. So now it's virtually undetectable. So when they say that the use of it isn't as prevalent,
it's debatable.
It's debatable, and I'm cynical about it, because where there's money, there's drugs. It's that simple. I'm cynical about it. It just means to me that they're really good at masking it. They're very good at hiding it. And generally speaking, what they say is the only levels where guys are being busted regularly are in the amateur cycling level, amateur competitions. But that also tells you that they don't have the money and the support team behind them.
Yeah, to hide what they're doing, to mask what they're doing.
They don't have the wherewithal. The professional cyclists will spend whatever it takes to be able to hide the fact that they're using it. Now, who's heard of Lance Armstrong? Yay. Who would not have heard of him had he not used EPO? Yay. Before he admitted using EPO and other drugs.
Incidentally, he was never actually detected for, hence how good it was at that
That's
time
right.
that he was using and the testing was poor. He got through other channels.
That's right. And he finally admitted it openly. And also his team members, other members of his team came out and said, yes, there was a systemic program of use every single day. And cyclists these days, they wear monitors so that if their blood pressure drops below a certain level, they wake up and hit a ergometer to get the blood pressure up, get their blood flowing more, just because they die. I mean, literally dozens of cyclists have died over the years from heart attacks. And these are the fittest cyclists in the world, and they're all dying in their 20s from heart attacks.
And there was actually some research you did, Xian. There's groups of deaths amongst cohorts of people.
That's right. They did some research. There was a cluster between 1987 and 1990. So it's like, what's that, 4 years or so? They had 20 Belgian and Dutch cyclists died, mostly from sudden cardiac events. So that means that something affected their heart, which means something affected the blood flow. Okay, so even though, because it's very difficult to do autopsies to detect EPO abuse, in fact, it's probably close to impossible. They can never really tell, but it's highly unusual that you had, how many was it? 20 cyclists died in a 4-year period from heart attacks, young professional athletic champions. Okay, so it's fishy. Now, when they say that they're using things like microdosing and gene doping, it's virtually impossible to tell. Okay, so the only way they'll ever wipe it out, really, is if the athletes themselves decide to not take it. But there's even talk, there's documentaries and so on of athletes who have come out who join professional teams with a desire to not use performance enhancing drugs, but they're basically told flatly that as part of the team, it's part of the program. And if you don't want to take it, that's fine. You just might be better off going to a different team. There's been widespread abuse. In fact, I think I mentioned in my book, 1 year the French government realized that the danger, the effect it was having financially to the French tourist industry. So they said, well, we're going to prove that we've sorted it out. So they tested something like 168 resident professional cyclists in France, and 167 of them tested positive for performance enhancing drugs. So that fell flat on its face. See, where you've got money, you've got the attractiveness of using drugs. And if the difference between coming first and being a nobody is a 1% improvement in your performance over the entire course, well then, of course, it's going to be very attractive to them.
Xian, you've got there, get back to Lance Armstrong, his first few rides, in the first few tours, he didn't finish like one or two of them, didn't he? And he finished fairly low. And then he started on his program and he won 7 in a row. I mean, the difference in results is phenomenal.
He had, now there were basically 20 20, let's say 20 stages per Tour de France. So in 3 tours, that's 60 chances you've got of winning. He won twice, and he didn't finish the Tour de France in 2 out of 3 times. And in the one time that he did finish, he came 36th. Then, all of a sudden, he wins 7 in a row, which he later admitted he was using performance-enhancing drugs to do it. So I can tell you now that we have stage winners in the Tour de France this year. It's up to its rest day today, 11th stage tomorrow. You've got stage winners there that I guarantee most people would not be able to name 7 out of the 10 winners. Okay. Lance Armstrong, who won 2 stages in 3 Tour de France's and didn't finish twice, do you think people would remember his name today if he hadn't used the drugs? So that's just one of the reasons why people use it. It's so attractive just to get that little edge and push you. You know, you find, whereas you're normally getting tired up a 10-degree slope, you just don't get tired. You just keep going. You're like a machine. But there has to be payback. You lie down that night and die. You know, I think it's very sinister. What other performance-enhancing drugs are people using?
Well, the traditional different anabolics is very common for recovery, both for recovery and for performance. And a common thing that some athletes will do is they'll train in locations away from where they're competing or where drug testers are able to get to. It's a very common thing done in track and field, done in athletics, done in combat sports. It's been done for a long time. They just, you know, out of range, essentially. They let the drug testing organizations know where they are, because with the blood passports these days, athletes have got to let the drug testing WADA usually is in each country, know where they are literally 24/7. I've had athletes that they had to go out to do something for their child or something like that, and WADA had turned up and they didn't let them know on the online form where they were, and they get a strike. And I think if you get 3 strikes, that's counted as a positive drug test. This is how. So at the beginning of the year or a life change, the athletes have got to let them know new job, where they're training, where they're living, where they might be at any point in time, so they can randomly get tested. It's quite intrusive. And then the other things, stimulants, they've always been used. I remember you sharing with us at a camp in the mid-90s, stimulants being used, or uppers, they're often called as well, to help athletes get up and have more work capacity.
Even cocaine, things like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Anything that dulls your sense of pain. Even like they might look at dope as not necessarily a performance-enhancing drug, but if it alters the mind in some way, there are times when even that can
relax the mind before
right.
competition, nerves and that type of thing. And you've got lots of peptides these days that are used as different variations of those things as well. And they can be used if you're not if you're not testing. Like, there's a lot of people using them, but for testing, there's organizations that obviously don't allow you to do that as well. So there's a lot of scope for manipulation of hormones of the body, that's for sure.
And there's one thing that Charlie Price, who was the coach of Ben Johnson, Charlie Francis pointed out. He said that, sometimes you don't use drugs to get a 2-meter advantage. You use drugs to catch up on the 2-meter disadvantage because everyone else is using drugs. Okay, and when Ben Johnson got busted in '88, he was the scapegoat. And it's since been shown that 6 of the 8 finalists in the sprint
88 Seoul Olympic final.
Yeah, the 88 100-meter Seoul Olympic final have been tested positive at some stage or another for performance-enhancing drugs. Any drug, even in shooting, for example, they use beta blockers. They're drugs that actually calm your heart down, so that when you shoot the gun, you have this effect of a heartbeat moving the gun. So when the heart calms down, the shot becomes more stable. So even in shooting, they have certain drugs which are tested.
I think I remember in Icarus, there's a fantastic doco on Netflix called Icarus that turned from a recreational cyclist. One year he did a cycling event with no drugs, and the next year he was self-recording a documentary on himself using performance-enhancing drugs to see how he'd go. And it side bent. I sort of went on a tangent, that story, because he got in contact with a head drug pharmacokinetics, whatever you call it, guy from Russia, and he was hiding in the US. Essentially, eventually he brought him to the US because there were some things going down. And I think of all the sports, if I remember correctly from Icarus, it was only ice skating that there was no institutionalized drug program in the Soviet Union, from my understanding. Every single other sport had institutionalized performance enhancement drug use.
Another really interesting statistic that I think is embarrassingly funny: when Lance Armstrong was banned from cycling, all 7 of his Tour de France victories were taken away from him. But they didn't replace him with anyone, because PED, performance-enhancing drug abuse, was so widespread through the Tour de France that there was no way that they could assure anyone that there was no doping going on amongst the top contenders. So I think that's an embarrassing statistic, to think that someone gets removed, but they're not going to replace him with anyone because they think that everyone is using drugs. They just haven't been busted yet. And then you have blood doping as well. For those who are familiar with it, you understand what blood doping is. If you're not familiar with it, basically what they do is they take blood, remove it from your body. The body compensates by producing more blood, then they put it back in. So theoretically, you have more oxygen coursing through the body.
Yeah, oxygen carrying capacity. They reintroduce it.
That's
so you've got
right.
more little vehicles in your veins and your blood
Yes.
to carry that oxygen around to make the work easier.
So instead of 10 units carrying oxygen, you now have 11 units carrying oxygen. So it gives you that advantage. In Kyokushin, look, without naming names, I could think of 3, probably 4 people off the top of my head who I suspect. Now, look, it's when you get a cold, you go to the doctor, say, I'm sick. The doctor says, what's wrong? Well, I've got a runny nose, I'm sneezing, I'm coughing. He says, yeah, you got a cold. You don't go, prove it. What do you mean? Well, I'm not going to take your word for it. Prove it. Okay, let me take a blood. Yeah, there you go. Look, you've got a cold. Okay, you don't have to be a genius to tell when someone's using performance-enhancing drugs. They go from being middleweights to super heavyweights with a 6% body fat.
Yeah.
The vascularity, the shape in their body is unnaturally altered. Okay. Obviously, strength plays a big role in certain. When you're stronger, you're more confident as well. So it plays on your head in that way as well. But the downside is, over the years, you look at people who have died, people who've gotten sick, not just in Kyokushin, but also in all kinds of athletics and sports. Floris Griffith-Joyner, one of the great sprinters of all time, drops dead in the mid-30s. So that sort of thing, I think, is very, very significant.
And we're seeing it now, Shian, in a rising martial art of submission grappling, submission wrestling, or the grappling sports, particularly no-gi grappling. It seems to be rampant now. All the top competitors are essentially, Gordon Ryan, he was open about it. He did a video on YouTube that, yes, I use, and this is what I do, and blah, blah, blah. So it's, in my professional experience, that's the first time in my life I've seen a sport come out and the athletes come out from the sport openly talking about doing it. I don't know if that's the best influence for young people. I mean, that's a debate. That's something that we all choose to do. But even though in bodybuilding, it's so obvious that, drug use has just been rampant forever. But even that was hidden. Joe Weider back in the day, and the magazines were like, they use protein powder 2000, they have 6 scoops a day, and these programs, like, they were even covering it up. But grappling is not even covering it up. I mean, they're just openly talking about it. Some athletes are sponsored by life extension clinics. So it's a real paradigm shift that's happening at the moment. And the other interesting thing, I came across a young athlete a couple of weeks ago. He's 16, and in the last, and he's going through puberty, obviously, but in the last, he was, according to his friends a year ago, he was pretty small. Now you should see him, he's completely changed his physique. He's got 170 kilo bench press at 16 years old, you know. So he's obviously helping.
He's got a very good diet.
Yeah, really good diet at 16 years old. So that's the influence that can happen from seeing things online to kids taking them on board. And while they're still developing hormonally, and the impact that has. And there's another person that I've seen in his mid-30s. He's now publicly talking. He's a public figure, and he's publicly talking about being on hormone replacement therapy and doing it under doctor supervision. But he was also, when he was younger, abusing anabolics. And you wonder what effect that abuse had at a younger age when his endocrine system wasn't fully developed, to now he was talking about in his mid-30s having low libido, you know, no energy for training, poor muscle mass, blah, blah, blah. So it's interesting, these correlations that you see over time long enough. And the other thing that people don't talk about is the coming off side. Everyone talks about going on and doing this, but Shane, you're a little bit older than me, and the other side of things people don't care about. I mean, there's that famous study that's, I think it was in the 90s, and they asked athletes, if you would guarantee you're going to die at 35 or 40, but
the
you
Barcelona Olympics, 96.
Was it that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
they asked them, if you could take a drug that 100% guaranteed you'd win the gold medal, but also 100% guarantee you'd be dead by 35, would you take it? And over 70% said on the survey, yes. But what's interesting is that I tend to believe that if you go, okay, here it is, I don't think they'd take it. So they have in their head that they'd do anything. And a lot of them, the fact that you could say to them, here's a drug, it's going to kill you at 35, but you'll win the gold medal, take it. They go, no. But they take the drugs anyway. What that tells me is in their head somewhere, they think that they're safe. They think they can use the drug without the downside. And it just doesn't work like that. That, you know, and the other thing too is, as Mitch says, coming off it, I interrupted your thought, but the point is sometimes we only talk about the death statistics. We don't talk about the statistics of people who have suffered massive health problems, huge joint problems,
depression,
psychological, yes, depression, also cardiovascular disease, having heart surgeries and liver surgeries and things like that, which you can't really tell, but it's highly likely that as high performing, extremely healthy athletes, it's unusual that you'd need certain types of cardiovascular disease operations and things like that. And, you know, so, I mean, there are people with congenital problems. But when somebody lives an incredibly athletic life and then decides at some stage to start using performance-enhancing drugs, they go from a lightweight to a super heavyweight with incredible definition and vascularity. And then at some stage in their life, they need to address unusually premature
chronic
health
conditions.
Yes, I think there's a correlation there. But like the medical profession will tell you, it's very hard to prove that these 20-odd athletes who all died, all cyclists who all died around the same time, coincidentally at the period that they call the PED, the EPO era. It's just a huge statistical anomaly that so many athletes, so healthy, suddenly die.
All have the same outcome.
Yes, so it's true. Bicarb soda, I think bicarb soda is completely underestimated for a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, it's a great way to alkaline the body. Just if you're going to do anything with bicarb soda, start at a very low dose initially.
Yeah, otherwise you could be spending a lot of time on the toilet.
Yeah.
Testosterone from coming off cycle and general drop is also detrimental. Look, I think introducing any largely incredibly effective performance enhancing drug and then coming off it is going to present huge problems, particularly psychologically, because if you get used to being a certain alpha style athlete, then suddenly you're back. You can't even, like Lance Armstrong, 7 times winner of the Tour de France. No one has ever done that. Back to where before he used drugs, he didn't even finish 2 out of 3. And he only ever won 2 stages out of 60 odd stages. So it's very hard psychologically to go from walking down the street where everyone's eyes turn towards you to just being a no one. You know, I think that's a real good point there, Al, that you make. There's a theory that you're born with a certain amount of heartbeats for your life, and you can use them up quicker if you put your heart under unnatural duress. I think it's interesting. I even talked about that in the book. I think if the average heart rate is 72, and if you do the math over a period of, say, 75 years, compare it to someone who trains so that, let's say, once a day for an hour or two, they're stressing their heart rate right up to 200 beats. But because of the introduction of a healthy lifestyle, their heart rate beat is not 72, their heartbeat is 50.
40 even, mid-40s.
Yeah, Muhammad Ali, I heard his lowest heartbeat was around 28.
Yeah.
Ron Clark, the Australian runner, 32.
Yeah, it's
my heart rate now, it used to be around 50 to 52. Now it sits at around 53, 54.
Yeah, mine sits low 40s when I'm awake, and I don't know, asleep it'd be probably lower.
There you go. So if we are given a certain number of heartbeats, people, I think stressing it to the point where you get benefit is very, very valuable. But the problem is when you stress it through using drugs, which is, I think, what you're talking about, Marco, then you're introducing a whole new problem. Okay. And anything that you introduce endogenously, exogenously is a problem. When you introduce things from outside the body, there's a real problem, I think. I have brachycardia.
Pulse is low 20s.
Wow. Do you find that has benefits and drawbacks, or just drawbacks? That's really interesting.
While we're talking about heart rate too, a great thing to do is to look at your own heart rate fairly regularly. Like you can get sphygmometers, electronic ones that look at your blood pressure and heart rate. And if you can buy them, they're maybe $100, $150, and they're good to have. Like once a week, I do my blood pressure and I look at my resting heart rate, and you can just over time see they should both be dropping. Obviously, not too much because then you die. You know, there's a happy medium there, but you generally want them lower at a healthy level. And if something's changing for you over time, training wise, like you're training a lot, you're tired, and your heart rate's always higher, it probably means you're a little bit overtrained. There's different heart rate variability things you can do if you want to monitor them daily as well. You can look that up, but these are good things to monitor if you want a healthy lifestyle.
I was speaking to one swim coach who used to train a lot of the Olympic swimmers.
Yep.
Went around and watched one of his sessions, actually a couple of them back in 2000 leading up to the Sydney Olympics. And his athletes would monitor their heart rate every single repetition, every single 100 meters. They had a thing which they just put it here and it'd give their heart rate. But also they had a monitor next to their bed. And if they'd wake up and their heart rate was 10 beats higher than what it would normally be, they'd go back to sleep and they wouldn't train because they haven't recovered. And that's the first sign of them getting something like an overtraining cold or something like that. So it's very interesting. Ronan's got the brachycardia.
I feel great.
Low heart rate. Cardiologist studied my heart for years. Doing an hour of bag work and my heart will rise to 40s. Yeah, you poor bugger. It was interesting seeing how much Andy's body shape changed when he went to K1. We're talking about Andy Hook. Yeah. Look, it's a sad story, and we all loved Andy. I actually fought in the 4th World Tournament with him. But he was fighting at the extremely highest level of competition for 17 years minimum that I know of. I watched him in the Third World Tournament.
So that's 84.
That's 84 all the way through. So he's talking, I think he passed away in 2001 or something, 2000. So, no one would ever like to point the finger at him, but it was a very sad thing. One, his physicality for 17 years seemed to me to be well above average. He's a good example. If he did, and I'm not saying he did, but if he did, is a good example of someone who's kind of forced into a situation because he was almost forced into fighting. What would happen is there was a financial arrangement which seemed to happen, which meant that even if he wanted to retire, he couldn't. Right. Because he kept owing money. So the next fight was the prize money was money that he owed people. So if he was ever going to get out of the fight game, something had to break like that. It's very unfortunate. My fighters used to get accused of using drugs.
Yeah, it's actually a compliment. If you're training right and training really well, ideally, and I say this as a coach, I've had tons of athletes that have been accused of doing things as well, and that's actually a compliment. When you think of it that way, it's a compliment.
Yeah, and I remember one instructor, when a couple of my students started fighting, they accused me of using drugs, which also tells me that perhaps they were using drugs, because the only way they could get an increase in performance was through using drugs. So they're going, oh, well, you've got a similar increase in performance, so therefore what are you using? But I said, well, they just train hard. He said, well, we train hard too. I said, well, what is hard training in your books? He says, well, they really, really train hard 4 nights a week. And Mitch was a live-in student. Those guys used to train really, really hard 5 nights a week, 6 mornings a week, plus gym work. And so they're doing more than double the amount of training. And it wasn't just insane training. It was well-designed, well-planned training that allowed them
technique, tactically, all that, like learning skills that you can apply. It wasn't just bashing bags, but it did include a lot of fitness stuff as well.
Yeah. So anyway, look, performance-enhancing drugs, Tour de France. I love watching it. I just love watching it. But when I watch these guys tear up a 7-kilometer uphill climb, and they're averaging like 30 kilometers an hour all the way up.
Well, in the the average race pace during the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, the Tour de France was about 38.5 kilometers from the research. That's including all of it. Whereas now the average race pace is about 40 kilometers, 41 kilometers an hour. But in fairness, we're not testing like and like, because back then the Tour stage was a little bit longer. Now it's a little bit shorter. So you'd expect it to go up a little bit. But the hills, I think they're a little slower now than what they were in the 90s. But equipment's obviously better as well, so the overall pace is faster. Yeah. So it's hard to tell. It's really difficult to determine.
You also have tactical improvement as well.
Peloton tactics
and nutritional tactics. So the science has improved over the time as well. But anyway, the unfortunate thing is, if anyone ever was to try to convince me that the Tour de France is 100% clean, you'd have a hard time doing it, because it's just too attractive, and the testing methods are one thing, but the masking methods are another, and they're getting very, very good. And even the doping agencies have come out and admitted that it's got to the point where they don't even know anymore, because they test and test and test, but they don't even know if their testing is keeping up with the masking. And when you're talking about DNA doping and microdosing and things like that, which virtually make it impossible to detect.
Yeah, and there's that doco, the Clear Balco Lab story as well, which is another one. Barry Bonds, a famous baseball coach. Marion Jones, she was a golden girl for Sydney Olympics in the 2000s, and CJ Hunter, I think it was her husband at the time, tested positive, a weightlifter. I think he was. And
discus thrower.
Discus thrower, sorry. And then she won, I think, 3 golds. And then she ended up, they had this product called the Clear, and it was called the Clear essentially because it was clear. You couldn't test for it. Victor Conte, I think, was head of Balco Labs at the time. And that's another fascinating thing that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s as well. So that's more evidence that the chasing what's happening. Yeah, we don't actually know how much it is, because who knows what's going on now that we find out in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Exactly. So anyway, look, use them at your peril. I mean, if you want to use them, you're an adult, you make up your own mind. It's like any drug or any alcohol. It's your choice. But just don't kid yourself that you, of all people, have some magic formula that means you're not going to suffer with the consequences the same way everyone else does. Okay, it's mathematical. You can't avoid consequences. Everything weighs up, everything balances out. And if you have the genetics to be able to use it for a period and then avoid it, well done. But you also have the psychological side of it as well that you have to deal with. Basically, you need to deal with that too. I remember I felt really guilty once for using performance.
You're telling me this.
I felt terrible. I think it was before the 1985 Queensland titles, and I turned up that day so guilty because I'd used performance-enhancing drugs because I had a coffee that morning. Somebody told me coffee is like a performance-enhancing drug. So
there are limits for how much caffeine you can have.
I'm sure.
Yeah, there are.
I'm sure a mini long black
is
from
under.
McDonald's. Yeah. But anyway, I just think it's funny. Look, take responsibility. That's all there is to it. If you're the sort of person whose career you feel is unavoidable, like Mitch said, Gordon Ryan's come out and he did a documentary on his use.
YouTube, yeah.
And I spoke to his coach, who pointed out to me that he was technically probably better than anyone of his era. There's no doubt about it. He was just a natural, and he was beating everybody until suddenly everybody started to use drugs. He had to take them to catch up to the disadvantage. He's training with guys who previously he could go boom, 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 and now he's going and they're rock. So there's that side of it too. I understand if that is so important to you that you're willing to compromise, knock yourself out. For me, that's not something. I've never been that elite level of athlete, so it's never been a challenge for me. Wuss. Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it. Yeah, Ronan, you're right. I just felt so guilty. I didn't sleep. But, we could talk about this for a long time because there's a lot more to it, But anyway, look, it's there. It's in the world. Nothing you can do about it. Just don't be part of it. That's my advice. And I'm not like some sweetheart who, lives with rose-colored glasses. I'm old enough to know, and old enough to have seen evidence over the years. I've had friends, acquaintances die for unexplained causes in their youth, but I knew that they were doing all kinds of performance-enhancing drugs. Is there a correlation? We'll never know. But you can always remove the possibility of the correlation by not using them. It's pretty simple. Us fellas, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate
Good to see you, and look forward to seeing you next time.